This is my backpack. I love this backpack. This was a birthday gift from my mother last year. And this backpack, where I have the proper Japanese symbols, I have a Godzilla who looks like Godzilla. I have the rising sun. This would not have been possible if Gareth Edwards had not done a sophisticated and proper reboot of this film series. Welcome back, Kaiju fans. I'm not going to mince words here. It blows my mind how many whiny, unappreciative little whores took this movie for granted. Yes, there is room for beef and criticism, but let's take a moment and appreciate. It is the year 2014. Michael Bay is one of the biggest, best-selling movie directors, producers. He had 2 movies that summer: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Transformers. Transformers 4. And Legendary Pictures opted to hand a big title property, a franchise starter, to an indie director who made a movie about electric space squids and dared to actually focus on the human element. They handed him hundreds of millions of dollars between special effects, production, and advertising. We are so lucky. We are so lucky with how this movie came out. I can appreciate some criticisms. I have some criticisms myself. We are so lucky. This could have easily been the 1998 disaster times 100. Very easily. And it wasn't. It was a film that, if anything, smartly backtracked itself into old school film style. We're not even stopping with the backpack. I have a wallet. Folks, I have a Godzilla wallet that I'm actually proud of. So where do we start here? I think the message Gareth Edwards understood with this, and I've seen it on reader boards since about 2003, 2004, was that notion that the American attempt at Godzilla, Zilla, 1988, took the God part out of our monster, out of the King of the Monsters, which I couldn't agree with more. He's okay being Zilla. I even kind of like the peaceful concession the Olive Branch offered in Final Wars by allowing him to be part of the Toho canon, but a shitty part of the Toho canon. That said, I think Gareth Edwards knew exactly. Almost every decision in this movie, I think, comes down to putting God back in Godzilla. Okay, so I guess, as I've done before, we need to start with, how is this film a sign of the times? And this one's tricky, because frankly, he defied so many industry standards. He defined so much of what people expect with a big budget film like this. He really just all over the place, and that's what I hear the most complaints about. And yes, I sympathize to an extent. I think we needed about 10 more minutes of Bryan Cranston, and we needed maybe 6 more minutes of actual Godzilla versus M.U.T.O action. But the fact that we had a film director who had a budget that could have done insane things, was reserved and subtle, is such a blessing. It is such a blessing, and you better believe that whole industry took notice. You don't go from the cheapest kaiju film ever made to reopening Godzilla more than a decade after America already fucked up the character to helping reboot the Star Wars franchise. He did something right here, and people who know this business and know good storytelling recognized it right away. Give the man some fucking props. Um, Lost it. As a sign of the times, right? How does this movie reflect where cinema is in 2014? It's a convoluted thing because, as I said, he bucked almost every trend of film. But nowadays, films and how well they do and how well they're respected have a lot to do with their background, with the fan base, what the fanboys want. We're living in the golden period. Hi, the fanboys matter. And Gareth Edwards knew if he gave a strictly, painfully, obviously Hollywood version of Godzilla, the fanboys were going to chew him up. It was going to be 1998 all over again. And that's what I think reflects in this movie, that he knew he needed to pay homage to the traditional Godzilla. He needed to get back to what made Godzilla the king of the monsters. It could not be an oversized iguana who lays eggs and gets taken out by military missiles because he's confused by a bridge in America. This Godzilla literally, I think this was a cute little jab, actually. I forget what it's called, the Golden Bridge in going into San Francisco. I've been to San Francisco twice. I should know the name of this bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge, he just right through it. Whereas the bridge in Roland Emmerich's Dean Devlin film is a complication of wires for our poor iguana. This Godzilla, it's literally up to his waist, and he right through it. Right fucking through it. I think that moment more than any other was him going, don't worry, fans, this is not the film, this is not the other remake America attempted. This is not that reboot. This is legit Godzilla now. And it's one of the best scenes because it's shortly after that shot where he breaks through the bridge, you see him. You get a nice long distance shot. You see his full body. You see him in relation to the buildings and the bay, and you get the full power of what a crazy, huge, epic monster he is. We get to the heart of Godzilla here. So what I said before, the whole factoring in of God back into Godzilla, I think this was a key part of why we do not see him a lot through the movie. I think he is taking cues from the Greek and Roman gods. They are powerful entities. They have an agenda that is theirs and is something that humans don't necessarily understand or get to have a say in. And by keeping him kind of shrouded through the movie, we build the mystery and we build the tension of this monster. Whereas if we had, a la Michael Bay's Transformers, been inundated so many times with the visuals that we can't even keep track anymore of who's who, it takes any mystery out of it. This Godzilla, as a god, we have questions about him. We are left the movie with questions about him. We start the movie with questions about him. Ooh. I think these are part of the important details he wanted to get back to. He also clearly wanted to get back to the Ishiro Honda period. And in more ways than one, don't worry, folks. First of all, hiding him for a while, letting the tension build up to his reveal. He cares about that. But and I really, if you've seen my review with the compare the contrast between Mothra and Biollante, I talk a lot about how Ishiro Honda creates nature. He wants nature to be on your mind. He gets nature right in his shots. Sometimes it's even more prominent than the monsters themselves. The next time you watch this film, think about how many times does the camera linger on a lizard, on a wolf, on the birds hitting the bus. He took this cue and he ran with it. He pays attention to what Ishiro Honda was doing initially. One of the most interesting transitions. I will backtrack a little. I will admit I have some beefs with the whole Ford Brody character arc, and mostly just said it's a little bland. It's a little predictable. The Millennium series has tackled soldiers who want to take down Godzilla for numerous reasons. But one of the scenes that really stands out to me is after the M.U.T.O attack on the bridge with the flaming train that goes by. He wakes up. He is literally covered in mud. He is covered in dirt and the earth, and you have the wolf right in his face, and he stumbles up to get attention, and then that's kind of the point of the film where then he addresses the military and says, yeah, I'm not really part of this, but I can be and I should be a part of this. I think subtly with the imagery, Gareth Edwards, and he's nodding to Shiro Honda here, the character had to reconnect with nature. He had to really, literally, in the most visceral way possible, reground himself with nature to then step up and be the hero who eliminates the M.U.T.O's nest. And the other thing with all of this afterwards, I call it the Ishiro Honda mirror, that the human action mirrors the monster action. Gareth Edwards knows this. He's a smart fucker. He goes right into, so the M.U.T.Os are trying to reconnect and start their family. And Ford and his wife, poor Elizabeth Olsen, who's actually a spectacular actress. If you've seen her in her indie work, she's a spectacular actress. She doesn't get used much in this film, which is a shame. But we do have that connection of a family trying to come together and worried about their offspring, and we have the M.U.T.Os trying to come together and reproduce. It's right there. The parallels, but Gareth Edwards is bold enough not just to parallel the M.U.T.Os. He's not. I think it's interesting that they're not just strictly villains. He does offer some sympathy to the M.U.T.Os. They want to survive. And you feel when the nest blows up and the poor alien queen, the M.U.T.O queen, you hear this cry of pain and desperation from her. You feel it. But the biggest one is towards the end of the conflict, where like you see Godzilla hurt and he stumbles and he falls and he's feeling pain, and Ford is in the same condition. He's exhausted. He's put up with so much, and he crumbles down, and they both crumble down together. The Ishiro Honda mirror. Gareth Edwards got it. He got it. So one of the things I haven't heard a lot of people touch on, I hear people who both like the M.U.T.O design and dislike it at the same time. I really like it. I really like it. I think it's fun. It's that right blend of organic and alien, that they're intimidating and kind of weird, but they also fit in perfectly kind of with Toho's lineage. And I'm going to go ahead and be crazy kaijuologist here. Hi, M.U.T.O. I think he wanted, when he was working with his production team, a monster that mimicked Toho's monsters and took design cues from them. Hi, I have weird red eyes that are almost like a monobrow, mono eye thing. Who else says that? Oh, Gigan? I have wings, I can fly. or I have giant pincer-like legs. Almost every physicality, every physical point about the M.U.T.O, we have seen Toho implement in other monsters. It's almost like a best of list that they wrapped up and said, what are some of the more interesting traits? Okay, Rodan flies, Kamanga has legs. I mean, the fact that they walk on those weird one legged pincer things that, again, it looks like Gigan's claws. I think he was taking the cues from what Toho's designs had already established. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to tackle was the way we reintroduce the character of Godzilla here. And again, this isn't simple. This isn't a simple explanation. Let's just. I'm going to pause. We're going to come back to this. So, one of the things I said at the top of this trilogy I want to tackle is the reintroduction of Godzilla's character. And this is another area Gareth Edwards is not simple about. He's very sophisticated, and there's layers of nuance here that we have to appreciate. If I had to make the choice, I would say he actually kind of leans into 70s Godzilla. 70s Godzilla shows up when he's meant to. He protects his turf when he's meant to. It's almost a convenient plot device, but he's not lazy about this plot device. He gives us a good explanation, and I really like it. I think it's a perfect fit for the King of the Monsters. This idea of the alpha predator, that he is the top of the food chain. He has to take out the next levels. And also, it's a subtle little plot point that where do we find the first M.U.T.O egg? It's inside the skeleton of another giant monster. I actually think this might tie in very directly to the sequel, which plans to introduce Mothra and Rodan, as well as King Ghidorah back in. But the M.U.T.Os are parasites. At the end of the day, these are two monsters that are born and thrive at a point where America, the Earth, is in a radioactive state. Radioactive material is just everywhere because it's a fresh planet or what have you. I'm not a scientist. But they also feed off of and put their eggs into the skeletons of other giant monsters. So part of the reason Godzilla is alone may very well have to do with the fact that the M.U.T.Os helped wipe out the other Godzillas. So there's a natural, instinctual rivalry there. But the way they feed off of nuclear energy, at least the imagery of the film suggests, they also feed off the energy of other monsters that you see where I'm going with this. If the eggs are inside the stomach of another monster, there's a parasitic quality here. So of course Godzilla has to tackle it. And that, I guess that idea of the food chain, it gives us a very plausible explanation of why he has to hunt them down. We have the whole the sonar thing they do where they call out to each other. It makes sense. If he's the top of the food chain, he's going to hear the lower part of the food chain communicating. It makes perfect sense that he shows up and he tackles it. I didn't quite hit this off. I really love the redesign back in Godzilla 2000 what Toho did. They gave a really nice blend of what they did is they made him look mutant, very genuinely like a mutant. And somebody finally had the question of the dorsal spikes, shouldn't they be intimidating and crazy and painful looking, if anything? I love that redesign. Whereas here he does tweak the mythos of Godzilla just slightly enough. He's not mutated by the atomic blasts, but he survives it. And that's what kind of alerts, I think, what was it, Monarch, or the secret organization that's been studying Godzilla for all these years. Oh, how good would it be to have a Venture Brothers reference right now? I think my main beefs come down to with this film that the plot it starts off with Ford and his father, Bryan Cranston's character, is really fascinating. It's a really interesting. It feels both traditional within a kaiju film and also like a nuance we haven't tackled. And I don't mind that they were bold enough to kill off his character. I mind that they did it kind of unceremoniously, and that the effects after the ripple wave effect of it afterwards just doesn't land. It seems like now we're on to action set piece as opposed to seeing the character have to deal with I lost my mother and my father to these same the M.U.T.Os. That's a shame. I think there was room here to really explore that relationship more and explore the consequences of the relationship more. That said, it is not a terrible human element. It's very much in line with what a lot of the Millennium series did. It's right there. I mean, the Millennium series, we have a girl who hops on the back of Godzilla for God's sake to I forget what she's even doing there. It's been a while since I've seen Mechagodzilla, but the fact that he gets so close and in contact with the M.U.T.O so much, it's nice. Uh, well, and it's not a Godzilla reboot if we don't have a train sequence. I That's another thing. I wish kaiju fans would sit here and appreciate how much Gareth Edwards clearly loves his kaiju movies. He hits almost every like basic moment that you have to have in a kaiju movie. A giant monster moving into the bay of a massive city with the military attacking him at the same time. We got it. Train sequence. We got it. Um, some of the images of this film, I guess we could talk a little bit about the politics. Uh, when Godzilla shows up, we have the tsunami, which is kind of, I guess you could call it timely or untimely for what Japan recently had to go through with that terrible earthquake. And I forget the Fukushima nuclear power plant that I think it might still actually be a problem for them. They're not even sure how much radiation leaked into their waters. Bet you anything the 2016 Godzilla film has a discussion about that. Um, there is the politics here, but frankly, I think Gareth Edwards, because he had the burden of having to reboot a Hollywood franchise, they wanted a franchise. He had to clear up the mess of the last American version. I think he, as a director, would have dealt with the politics a little more than the film got to, but it's not ignored. It's not ignored. The nice shot with Ken Watanabe and Dr. Serizawa. He's got the clock, the watch that was stopped right at the time the bombs were dropped in Japan. It's a smart, powerful moment, and the best thing is that it takes responsibility. It sits there and says to an American military leader, remember what you did to another country. Remember the effects that had. Can you do it to your own country? That's one of the most cowardly things about the 1998 Godzilla film is it somehow it's like, oh, the French did this. The French were testing nuclear weapons and the French created Godzilla. We're innocent. We did nothing. Cowardly, cowardly bullshit. So I appreciate how much this film is willing to tackle. I wish it had time to tackle more. Okay, kaiju fans, I'm getting worn out here. Boy, the Red Bull helped, and anytime I put on makeup, I feel great. But I need to start wrapping this up. If one of the questions folks might have, what's your favorite reboot? That's a miserable question because honestly, all three of these films I think are lovely, lovely versions of the monster that means so much to us and do some really interesting work in recapturing. I would say maybe the best and most efficient reboot has to be the first Return of Godzilla 1984. It has some sloppy parts, but it does get to the heart of what we talk about, of what Godzilla means as a character. Funny side story here. I remember being like 7 or 8 years old and having someone tell me, "You're not going to care about Godzilla when you're older. You'll outgrow that." And it terrified me. That idea that something that I loved so much would mean nothing terrified me. And as I grew up, not only did I grow up, but the series offered me more. The series kept giving me as I grew up and learned about politics, as I grew up and learned about world history, as I learned about cinema in the form of entertainment. I could always look to the Godzilla series and learn a new lesson and learn something more interesting. And I think Godzilla 1984 maybe typifies that the best. That when you need to get your energy back, you go back to your roots. You go back to why you started all of this in the first place. 2000 is a film I will watch anytime, any day. It's like candy. It just goes down so easy, and it's not a dumb candy movie. And the legendary reboot of Godzilla is maybe the luckiest thing to happen to any kaiju fan ever. Yes, we can parse some stuff, but there are so many fans who are ungrateful for what that film did. We could have ended up with something so much worse, so much worse. We should be grateful. We should be very, very grateful for what Gareth Edwards gave to us. God bless the man. Okay, fans. Oh, I gotta go eat something. Thank you for sticking it out through the trilogy. I'm gonna be back. I've got some countdowns. I want to get back to some countdowns. I've got some non-Godzilla related films that I'm dying to get to. I really appreciate the community outreach and response. I really do. It means the world to me. So keep it coming. Let me know what you want to see and hear about, and hopefully I can keep getting to it. Till then, I'm signing off from Denver, Colorado. We are the Mile High City, and we are getting higher all the time.